everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Liberation Hour here on YouTube. I hope everybody has had a wonderful week. I'm glad to be back here once again. I know it's been a little more than a week since last time. I actually got back from vacation a couple days ago. Took a nice little trip over to the beach, which was much needed to get out of the hot valley here. And obviously, a lot of stuff's going on still in the world. But yeah, just appreciate everybody for your continued support. I know that you guys have left some nice comments and all, and I'm looking to still try to grow the channel in many ways. Still working on a couple of things to get things improved and up and running here, obviously before the election really kicks off. I am planning in a couple of weeks, once the conventions are done and we get close to having the first debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, that I'll be doing my predictions for how the election will go with all of the electoral college and everything for each state. So stay tuned for that. I will have that coming up after September 10th, the first debate. And then I got some more episodes in the woodworks, but we have a lot to talk about here today. And I'm happy to be joined once again by another guest. I'm glad to have another good friend of mine on the show to talk about some things that are going on. Mr. Jake Moore, how are you doing, Jake?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Good, man. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And
Yeah,
I
right on.
know that you've told me before we've talked some things, and I know obviously you're taking some political science class. I know you want to major in that and all. I guess
Right.
I'll start. But before we get into all this stuff, I just want to talk to you. What kind of made you involved with political science? What made you kind of want to go for that for a major for yourself?
Well, especially over the last few years, has been just something I've just kind of been interested in. Just always kind of curious. Did a lot of reading and stuff, kind of challenging what people have been telling me, whatever family members, at school. Just like I've always just been kind of a curious person. So as I've dug more into things, it's definitely something that's drawn my interest. And then especially with being in high school during COVID and during that election year, and just how exciting and how just the whole media cycle and everything really got me enticed. So since really that news cycle was taken off, I've been hooked since, and just figured, hey, like this might be something I want to have a career in. I'm very interested in it, and yeah, never looked back since, really.
Yeah, and well, we've talked. That's awesome, man. And what we've talked, a couple political issues often. I'm sure people can see by your background. We talk a lot more music than anything. We share very similar music taste.
Yeah,
So people now have an idea of where what sports I like to play based off the last conversation I had on the last podcast, and then now you can see what kind of music that I'm into here as well. So yeah, we are both
right.
fellow metalheads, and I got to ask you before we get going on all this stuff, any bands you're looking forward to the most for Aftershock this year?
Ooh, okay. I'm looking forward to the Slayer reunion for sure. That's definitely a big one on my list. The Pantera reunion as well. And then sort of just all day Saturday. There's some classic bands, there's some smaller bands that I've been looking forward to see. I mean, I've always wanted to see Judas Priest. They're doing their headlining set, so I'm really psyched.
Yeah, I'm stoked for it as well, and I mean I'm sure there'll be a couple more changes with the set list, or not the set list, but the list of bands that are going to be playing before things actually kick off in October. But a late birthday present this year. It's typically been around my birthday, or a birthday present usually, to go in a little bit of a more than a week after this time. But yeah, looking forward to it. It should be fun. And,
Right.
that actually kind of gets back into the issues I want to talk about, because I know I mentioned last week to a lot of people that I am planning on talking about artists and how they're impacted by Ticketmaster and Live Nation and that
Oh
conglomerate.
yeah.
That is something I do plan on talking about in the future. That's something that'll probably be about a week or two out, because there's still so much stuff that's going on every week. And
Yeah.
another
It's
issue I'm
hard to
going to be
keep up.
talking about. Yeah, exactly. And another issue that I do plan on talking about next week. I know it'll kind of be a little bit later at that point, but I do need to touch on at least the athlete that's been what I like to call transvestigated at the Olympics for
Oh
the
man.
wrestling issue and all. So I'll be talking about
Oh
that
yeah.
next week. So that's a little preview for people for next week's show. But this week we have some issues we're going to go ahead and jump into. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get into it here right now. There we go. So the first issue got to talk about is this whole immigration issue and what's going on over in the United Kingdom. So we'll go ahead and jump into this article here from the Associated Press. What's behind the anti-immigrant violence that has exploded across Britain? Britain has been convulsed by violence for the past week as crowds spouting anti-immigrant and Islamophobic slogans clash with police. The disturbances have been fueled by right-wing activists using social media to spread misinformation about a knife attack that killed 3 girls during a Taylor Swift-themed dance event. The violence, some of Britain's worst in years, has led to hundreds of arrests as the government pledges that the rioters will feel, quote, the full force of the law after hurling bricks and other projectiles at police, looting shops, and attacking hotels used by asylum seekers. That actually leads into this other article here that I have from The Guardian that I wanted to talk about. Rioters try to torch Rotterdam asylum seeker hotel amid far right violence. Home Secretary condemns utterly appalling scenes as bottles and chairs thrown outside of the Holiday Inn Express. I'll have a video that I'll pull up here in a second. This is a picture right here that gives you an idea of some of the things that were going on. About 700 people gathered outside the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham before clashing with police. Some rioters hurled pieces of wood, bottles, and chairs and sprayed fire extinguishers at police officers. South Yorkshire police said that at least 10 officers had been injured, including one who was left unconscious with a head injury. Footage from the scene showed a bin on fire and protesters, some draped in St. George and Union flags, chanting, quote, "Get them out." And this goes back over to the article that I brought up earlier with the AP. So the violence began because of the attack that killed 3 girls between 6 and 9 on July 29th in Southport, a seaside town north of Liverpool. 8 other children and 2 adults were injured. It was assumed at that time that the suspect was a Muslim immigrant. He was a 17-year-old suspect, but was later debunked as his name was Axel Maganwa Ruda Kubana, who's been charged with 3 counts of murder and 10 counts of attempted murder. The suspect was actually born in Wales in 2006 and then moved to the Southport area in 2013. His parents were originally from Rwanda. So I'll go ahead and show this video to everybody here. This is from the Wall Street Journal, and then me and Jake will talk a little bit about it here. You guys can jump in. So you can see the broken windows there in that video, and the chance that it was going on, how many people are there, the police on horseback. It just gives you an idea a little bit of the scene just in that one instance there. And of course, there have been a lot more scenes in the United Kingdom just outside of that one as well, with violence and things that have been going on. And the reason I wanted to bring up this issue is because I think that this is something really worldwide we've seen just growing in the last decade, is just anti-immigrant and anti-migrant sentiment across the world. A much larger shift to the right for a lot of people, really, and you can see it in both parties here in America as well. You see a lot of, you saw a lot of that when it came to obviously Donald Trump. You still see that with him nowadays. That was one of the key things that really felt like it got him elected, being, kind of populist right in that sense in America. And before, I pull up some stuff just talking about how this kind of relates to the issue in the UK and the US. Jake, I just want to get your initial thought on, what came there out of the UK, your thought on why we've just seen maybe a rise in this anti-immigrant sentiment over the last decade, and what you feel overall can maybe be done about it.
Yeah, for sure. And just in when you were going over the issue there, one of the things that stood out to me was the all of the anger that was directed at this perceived notion that, oh, like, he's an immigrant, he's Muslim, like, obviously it was debunked, but like and then they use that sort of as like a scapegoat to be like, immigrants are coming in, they're causing chaos, violence, crime, like sort of direct all this anger and hatred falsely towards them, because like time and again it's proven that crime rates, violent crime rates, basically every level of crime rate that is out there is proven to be lower among immigrants, whether they're legal, illegal, because legal citizens, at least whether it's the U.S. or even comparable countries in Europe, are committing crimes at a far higher rate than immigrants. So I think it's silly, but it definitely is a worldwide issue. Absolutely, this hostility towards immigrants has really, taken off over the last decade or so with this rise of this right-wing populism, essentially, that leaders in North America and Europe have been campaigning on, which has sort of caused a lot of people to sort of embrace this nationalism. They're feeling protective of their national identity and culture, and they feel like they have an obligation to preserve it, but they're being conditioned falsely by conservative media to do so. Because really, there's no data to back up this hysteria that is that's ensuing. Especially like in UK, you have this post-Brexit world that they live in now, and anti-immigration rhetoric and stuff like that was part of what led to Brexit happening in the first place. Sort of these the pressure from people and concerns about immigration led to Brexit. So I think it's obviously globally, but in the context of the UK, that definitely has a lot to do with it, and it's just crazy to watch it all unfold.
Yeah, and I'm going to get into some of the data here in a second. I know that there have been, also anti-immigrant protests in other parts of the United Kingdom, or I think Great Britain encompasses all the countries. I got to understand the geography a little bit more, but
Yeah,
know that in Northern Ireland that there were protests. I think in Ireland proper itself there were protests as well over the last few months. But the one thing that really kind of stood out to me with this whole thing, right, is because well, obviously, guns aren't is as much of a thing over in the United Kingdom as they are here. You can kind of make the same comparison because I think there's a lot of people in the United States that would make the point that there are a lot of people who are anti-gun control, who, when it comes to these, mass killings, whether it's a shooting or a stabbing in this case, would not want the identity of the perpetrator to be shown out there in the media. Now, people will make that point from both sides, but I think you maybe hear more people maybe make the point from the right saying, hey, we don't want to glorify it. We don't want people to, basically these people to be seen as a martyr for somebody else to go commit this act. But then on the flip side of it, those same people are really happy to want to hop on and try to figure out who these people are so that they can learn the skin color, religion, or the status when it's a person who isn't a white person out there. And so
exactly.
yeah, and so you're seeing that a lot when it comes to this issue and others as well, and then they try to extrapolate it into a much bigger issue, and that actually gets into me wanting to bring up the data on this point. So let me go ahead and share my screen once again for you guys. This is data from the FBI. So this is back in 2019, the total amount of arrests that were made, 6.8 million, 4.72 million of them being white. And then, of course, it does go into murder here, and it goes into a few other points of data as well. But you can see right here, just for murder in and of itself, obviously a lot of these people being, people being naturalized citizens here, 3650 white, nearly 8,000 total. But then we go over and look at criminal non-citizens, and there have been 15,000 arrests in the this was for from 2017 to 2024. This was done by the Customs and Border Protections, arrests of individuals with criminal convictions. The highest year, 15,000. This last year, 14,000. And when we get, this is the big number here, homicide or manslaughter, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, violent crime. And obviously, violent crime includes all these things such as assault, battery, amongst various other things. But I think a lot of people say, oh, they're coming here, they're killing us, they're raping us or whatever. 23 homicides or manslaughters done by criminal non-citizens in 2024, 29 in 2023, the highest year, 62 in 2022. And I think the thing is, you see that at least in some news organizations out there, every time that one of these happens, it gets reported on as if it is happening thousands of times across the country to, I think, make people think it's a bigger issue than it is. Sure, these numbers are still horrible. Any violent crime is an absolute atrocity, and I actually think that there are good solutions to them. I can't believe I'm actually going to bring this guy up here, but I think one guy that came up with a really good solution to this is actually Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly actually came up with the idea of Kate's Law after Kate Steinle was killed by an illegal immigrant in San Francisco, basically mandating federal prison time for any foreign convicted criminal who returns to America after being deported, and them getting at least 10 years in prison. I think it's a good idea, but the problem is that instead of talking about solutions to the problems when these occur, they instead want to make the problem seem a lot bigger so that then we can just have the anti-immigrant or anti-migrant sentiment to where we don't allow any of it at all. Jake, I'll go ahead and let you reply to that, and then I have one other thing I want to bring up with this issue.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head for sure. It's all of these narratives that are being perpetrated by I mean, it's not just conservative media. And I mean, you could flip on NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN. I mean, if one of those murders happens, it's going to be on there. Like you even had at the State of the Union both Republicans and Democrats, chancing to Biden and getting him to, like, say the name of the female that was murdered by an illegal immigrant, and he went off script on during his speech, and was calling her out, and, like, sure, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the optics of it are rather odd, considering just the amount of homicides and murders that happen out there by just, US citizens. But yeah, we're gonna hyper focus on, one of the very few instances where it's an illegal immigrant or an illegal migrant um, that came across the border. So I think it's silly, and only serves as a to sort of manufacture this outrage about illegal immigrants coming in, because it's not, like you showed with the data, a huge pressing issue, and when you compare it to the broader scope of everything.
Yeah, and again, like responding to that, this is something you do see in both parties. Biden just helped pass an immigration bill that modeled Trump's immigration plan back from his first term when he ran. And this is actually another point of data that I want to bring up here. This is also from the Customs and Border Protection. This comes from a Reuters article that came out last year. Look at this. In Trump's term, he deported 1.5 million migrants. That's lower than Obama's terms, either of them. Obama deported 2.9 million in his first term, 1.9 million in his second term. The highest amount deported was actually his first year in office in 2009. And then this is at least through February. You can see Biden deporting 1.1 million during his first term, and the numbers are poised to either be comparable or exceed Trump's. And obviously, with the new bill that's been passed, it's likely going to exceed that at that point. But there's a bigger issue on this issue than just talking about, which side is to blame. Obviously, there's comes the solution side of it. And the thing is, this is for people who, even if you want to see less, immigrants or migrants coming to the country, certainly there is an issue with open borders. Like even Bernie Sanders famously said, and this is a great quote from him, said, open borders, that's a Koch brothers idea. But yet you have so many people from the right wing that try to try to claim that so many on the left want open borders, when in reality,
Right.
if you have so many illegal immigrants, these major companies and corporations are just going to use them for cheap labor. And ultimately, they are going to end up fucking up the housing market as well. So then the question becomes, what do we do to actually solve the issue? And this is why I wanted to bring this up, because I have a couple articles here, one from the BBC, one from the CNN. This talks about the issue in the UK, how many people cross the English Channel in small boats, and how many claim asylum in the UK. So this right here kind of shows you people crossing the English Channel in boats cumulative per year. You can see 2024 so far getting close to 2022 numbers if you look at it over the whole year. And you can see the last 4 years on this chart right here as well. This is from the Ministry of Defense. But I wanted to bring up, where do these migrants actually come from in the UK? And on the list here, you can see some glaring figures. Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, Iraq, Vietnam. Those 5 countries are all countries that we have either in some way, shape, or form gone to war with, therefore left these countries in way worse shape than they were before, meaning that there's way worse violence with the terrorists who are there now, which are worse than they were before the West went to war with them. And in the UK sense, they have obviously been a major part of helping in these wars along with the United States. Again, the UK does not have a good track history when it comes to wars and foreign conflicts either, along with the United States. So you can see here that a lot of these countries, a lot of them are more majority Muslim, but a lot of them have issues of violence in their countries, mainly that has not been helped and has actually been made worse by the conflicts committed by the West. And then you look over here at this CNN article here, as I pull this up, where immigrants come from and where they go after reaching the U.S. Mexicans represent the largest number of immigrants living in the United States. However, the top 10 countries are all in Latin America and Asia, and some of them on this list are not surprising to me as it tries to load. So you can see on here, El Salvador, Guatemala, and you can still see Vietnam and some others on here as well. I know that Honduras was, I think, right below Korea on this list too. Of course, China, some people trying to escape, the communist regime over there. Philippines has more of a authoritarian kind of government. So literally a lot of these people either trying to escape authoritarian governments, or in some cases with countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, trying to escape violence of drug cartels that is mainly there for because of the fact that we have the drug war in this country and have pushed everything to the black market. So a lot of issues are when it comes to immigrants trying to come to this country are either A, because of economic issues in those countries that are mainly propagated by sanctions committed by the United States or other countries in the West, B, from wars that have been propagated by countries that are in the West, like the United Kingdom and the United States, or because of the drug war that pushes things underground that leads to a black market in countries that are in Central America. So again, if you really want to solve immigration, you should be telling your government, hey, let's start caring for our own citizens. Let's not go to war. Let's make drugs legal to where we're not putting people in prison for things that are unnecessary, and we can actually go after violent criminals. And at the same time, we can still have a reasonable immigration system that still properly vets people, but it doesn't have to take 5 years for you to become a naturalized citizen, and it doesn't cost a ridiculous amount of money.
Exactly. Yeah, because, the vast majority of those people coming across are either, displaced, they're under a regime, they're struggling economically, and they're looking for opportunity. It's not cheap to come here. Like, those are all like, those demographics right there, they're the chances of them being able to afford and, to be able to go through the process legally and then go and learn, everything you need to do to pass the test and get through, the steps of becoming a naturalized citizen, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I'd say the vast majority of Americans that were born and naturalized here wouldn't be able to get through that process because it's not easy, and it definitely needs to be reformed without a doubt. But that's why, as I'm not the biggest fan of, giving power to states as opposed to having, nationalized systems in place. But you do have states, like California, sanctuary cities, sanctuary regions where we do let people seek asylum and sort of bypass that process temporarily to at least get themselves on their feet. And I think that's, when looking at reform, that's something that should be adopted nationally, because we do have the infrastructure to support these immigrants. It's just we're not investing money in the right places, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration when we go through our immigration reforms. Hopefully, with the upcoming administration, if uh, things do end up changing.
Yeah, and again, I think my only thing is like it. I would agree with you. I just think it can be easily done in a legal way, and you can do it still through, even with green cards, for example, right? So
Right.
there's only 140,000 green cards that are available each year for someone, and only 7%, or for everybody that wants to come to the country, and only 7% can go to one specific country at a time. So that right there incentivizes more people to come over illegally because you limit how many people can. And obviously, I
Exactly.
understand that we in America have the largest number of immigrants in out of any country in the world. We also have one of the highest populations out of a lot of countries out there in the world, and we also commit, unfortunately, a lot of the crimes out of a lot of countries in the world that lead to
Yes.
displacing a lot of people too. And all that I think needs to be brought up. And I don't think that we can tell somebody to go screw off or f off until we actually solve those other issues first.
Yes.
And then from there, we can have a broader issue of, okay, what do we do about this if there are still a lot of people that are trying to come over? But again, I think that making the process to actually become a naturalized citizen in this country a lot easier, but still having a strict vetting process is something that can definitely realistically be done if we
Right.
actually put the right money towards it. While at the same time, understanding that there are people that have situations where they're simply just trying to escape violence in their countries. And if we have helped propagate that violence, we owe it to those people to at least give them a temporary asylum.
Exactly, and that's most people. Like, of course, the media tries to characterize the majority of these people coming over as violent, as criminals, as drug cartels, whatever trigger words they want to use. But that's just such a small, like, you wouldn't be able to see it on the graph, percentage of people coming over. It's just the vast majority of people over here are simply just looking for a better situation, and when they do get here, the vast majority of them are productive. They're working the jobs that American workers don't want to work. They're doing the dirty stuff, the hard labor, and they're not getting compensated fairly for it. And they're still paying taxes on it too. They're still contributing to the economy, to their community. Uh, but no one wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about, they want to cherry pick little statistics to make it seem like that they're terrorizing our country or destroying it or whatever silly words they like to use in Western media. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's going to be interesting, really, this election cycle, how much that issue really gets brought up, and what both candidates have to say, and then ultimately what ends up getting done with that for sure. So I'm interested to see the conversation on that. I'm interested to really see what comes out of the UK. I really
Yeah,
feel bad for a lot of people over in the UK that simply just want
right.
to live their lives and have to deal. And it's also funny too. I just got to bring up, like, whenever you have a protest that is more on the left wing side of things, how much crackdown there is from police, really worldwide.
Oh yeah,
But then when it's something that comes from the right, the police are there, but they're there mainly just for show. And the funny thing is too, because like police people always bring up, oh well, police are there protect people and property. They did neither in this situation over in the
no.
UK.
Mm-mm. And when it's left wing, they're usually there, and escalation happens.
Right.
With the very opposite of what they were intended to be there for, and it's silly how that works. Especially, you have uh the Republican National Committee now. They've threw out all their Biden ads. They're running new ones, and especially with Walz, and they're using clips from 4 years ago, like in Minneapolis. This is all they got. They're you know going back, checking out the old film, saying, "Oh, Minneapolis was destroyed by rioters, and he let this happen and all that stuff." And it's so silly, that they have to go back that far and just go do a very small amount of a greater movement and hyper focus on it and try and blow it out of proportion. But that's what they do when it's a left wing protest. But when you go to right wing nationalist movements and they're doing their thing and they're pulling up to sort of counter protest, and no, never any media coverage on that. It's super backwards.
Yeah, and I mean, over here, I'd say it's certainly more of a and probably more of like an anti-Mexican kind of thing. Again, that's where a majority of the people come from. But obviously, with Trump,
Right.
we still had the Muslim ban as well, and over in the UK, it's much more Muslim based. And I think that there's still a lot of the propaganda that was used to go into war after 9/11, and a lot of the anti-Muslim propaganda. Really, you could still see the lingering drops and effects of that here today, even though that I think we're past to the point where people still remember 9/11, but at the same time, I think a lot of people have, I don't want to say moved on, but I think that they've at least acknowledged that, hey, that was a horrible thing that happened in history. We also probably didn't respond to it the best way. Let's, try to forget about that and, move on and get to another, a new era in our country. But I think that there's
Right.
definitely still remnants of that you can see in the rhetoric that plays a place today.
Especially for older generations as well. I think those that were maybe children when 9/11 happened, or weren't even alive, period, they're going to have a completely different attitude towards that than those that were adults and politically conscious during that time. But I think, yeah, definitely, as time moves on and heals and new generations are able to get into government and make those changes, you will see the sentiment change. But it is crazy though. I remember some things that stood out to me, especially with immigration and no hostility towards Mexicans, Muslims, whatever, at the RNC, was the dog whistles that speakers were making towards immigration policy in the 1950s. They didn't specifically bring up Operation Wetback, but they alluded to it a lot. The absolutely horrific. It was like 15 to 20 million people were abused and deported. A good chunk of them were legal immigrants too, and that's the policy that they're talking about. Yeah, we want to return to that. They said we want to do the largest deportation operation in the history, and everyone's like, I'm like, that's just kind of scary stuff when you think about it. It's like, why? Like, it's crazy how they've been conditioned to just hate this group of people, and they don't really know why, but they just have such strong feelings towards it, and it's crazy how that works over the last 2 to 3 election cycles.
And you know what a good question would be for a lot of those people? It's the same question they ask a lot of people when it comes to issues such as Medicare for all or others. How are you going to pay for it?
Very easily, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying in their case,
Yeah,
because no one's bringing up,
yeah,
how are
sure.
you going to
They
pay
don't
for
know.
deporting all those people? It's obviously going to cost a lot of money for enforcement, but yeah.
Yeah, but they can
So
afford the things they want to do, but not the things that actually would help people.
Speaking of enforcement, that actually kind of segues perfectly over to the next issue I wanted to talk about, and that relates actually here to this state in and of itself here, and that's homelessness here in California. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and bring this up. This is another article from the AP. I think a lot of people, for now, you can tell I personally I try to go with websites that don't have as much bias when I look up stuff, because I think that there's certainly some that definitely do have a right wing bias and some that certainly have a left wing bias. I think the AP does a pretty good job at staying down the middle and kind of sticking to the facts. And I have very much respect for that organization. So if you've noticed why
For
I have
sure.
a lot of articles from there, that's why. California Governor Newsom vows to take away funding from cities and counties for not clearing encampments. This actually came earlier this morning. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Thursday had a message for local governments: clean up homeless encampments now or lose out on state funding next year. Standing in front of a cleared homeless encampment in LA, Newsom vowed to start taking state funding away from cities and counties that are not doing enough to move people out of encampments and into shelter. The governor joined the California Department of Transportation, known as Caltrans, on Thursday to clear several encampment sites in the area. Quote, I want to see results. I don't want to read about them. I don't want to see the data. I want to see it. Thursday's announcement was part of Newsom's escalating campaign to push local governments into doing more homeless encampment sweeps. He ordered state agencies last month to start clearing encampments on state land, also pressured local government to do the same, though he cannot legally force them to act. That does relate back to late July, a few weeks ago, when he ordered the agencies to start removing them following a Supreme Court ruling allowing cities to enforce bans on sleeping outside in public spaces. I believe Grants Pass, Oregon, was one of the first cities that actually started trying to enact policies such as this after the Supreme Court went through with that ruling. This executive order directs state agencies to move urgently to address dangerous encampments while supporting and assisting the individuals living in them. Provides guidance for cities and counties to do the same, which applies pressure on them. They are not legally bound to the order. Of course, now you could see since then, of course, Newsom threatening with the cutting the funding. California is home to roughly 1/3 of the nation's homeless population, problem that has dogged Newsom since he took office. So, you can kind of think back to, and I wanted to bring this up, to back in the COVID days and back in 2021 when California really was spending a lot of money and time to try to fight homelessness. Newsom, I think, was putting people up in some hotels at the time where hotels obviously couldn't be used. There were a couple of programs that he set up during then as well. California spent a stunning $17.5 billion trying to combat homelessness during Newsom's time as governor from 2018 to 2022, but the state's homeless population has actually grown. There are now 181. I know this shows right here 170,000 homeless people, but there's actually 181,000 according to Cal Matters. So I guess I'll start by bringing this up to you, Jake. I want to bring this other sentence up real quick. It says, but with 17.5 billion, the state could theoretically have just paid the rent for every unhoused person in California for those 4 years, even at the state's high home costs. So, just want to bring up your thought on this, because to me, Newsom doing this really, to me, kind of just seems like a kicking the can down the road kind of thing, because ultimately what I feel is going to happen is, these people are going to be not kicked out of those encampments, but they have to go somewhere. So at the end of the day,
Right.
you either push them out to the sea and die, or they're basically going to be somewhere and they're going to have an encampment eventually in another place. So to me, I want to get your thought on what Newsom's doing here, and second, what do you think we could do to better combat this issue on a state level and even maybe at a national level?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think as to why Newsom's deciding to do this now, one, it is an election year, and this is one of the few issues that, especially with Californians, that like are going to be on the mind of most California voters. Is this something that they can see, like, there's actual tangible evidence, so like, they can walk down the street and see homeless encampments, and that's just, that's a key. There's a problem when people are saying that. So I think he's trying to at least fix what people are seeing, just by sort of like a band-aid solution almost. This isn't really addressing the root issues of anything. And homelessness has been an issue in California for decades. I mean, both under many governorships, both Democratic and Republican. It's only continued to gotten worse. There's been multiple actions taken by different governors over the years. You got Jerry Brown, you got Schwarzenegger trying to tackle this, and now you have Newsom. And they've spent so much money, but none of it has really been addressing the root problems of it. It's just been sort of trying to clean it up and make it look better uh, appearance wise. But it's sort of like an illusion almost. But it's not sustainable what he's doing, especially in the long term. I don't think it's necessarily a bad executive order in its entirety. I think there are some important things that we could highlight in it, such as like the state agencies that are responsible for overseeing this. They are required to notify campers far in advance of their relocation, and they're required to connect said campers, homeless people, to with public housing services, community resources if they're struggling with mental health or drug usage and stuff like that. So they are supposed to go about it in a way where they're relocating people in homes, shelters where they can be safe and get the services they need. But where I think this order it is where I disagree with it is that a lot of the campers that refuse for whatever reason to leave these sites, whether if it's because of their mental health issues and stuff like that, or they're just outright refusing, they can be incarcerated and arrested, and then thrown into this unfair justice system where they won't have equal or fair representation. And incarcerating vulnerable populations like homeless people have been proven over and over again over the last few decades, especially in California, to do more harm than any good. I mean, you see that with the war on drugs too. Definitely correlates here. It just pretty much exacerbates the issue at hand. So that's where I have an issue. But I think that the parts of the executive order where agencies are required to help relocate these people in shelters and get them mental health services, healthcare, and stuff like that. That can be a positive taken away from this, but ultimately it doesn't address a lot of the root issues that cause homelessness, like economic inequality, lack of housing, lack of access to healthcare, stuff like that. So it's definitely a multidimensional issue.
Yeah, and I can't remember the exact city off the top of my head. I know it was somewhere down in SoCal where they actually housed every single homeless veteran in the city. I have to go back and find it, but it was ultimately to really no extra cost, which was really interesting. Because here in California, we actually have a third of the nation's homeless veterans here as well. And you kind of brought up a couple of things that could potentially
Right.
be some of the issues with this as well. I think the first thing, and I'll bring this up. This is from the Pew Research Center. There's a lot of people that view affordable housing as a major issue because I think there's a lot of people that like the idea of it until it comes to their area. And I think the main reason that a lot of people dislike it, even when it comes to their area, is because they find that it ends up driving the cost of their house down. And the thing is, at the end of the day, like I'm not. Let me be clear. Like I'm definitely a person on the left, but I'm not like a communist. I'm not that far left. So on this issue, I'm not going to be a person that says, oh, every single house should be free. Therefore, we should make some regulations and bans and all that kind of stuff. I disagree with
Right.
that. But I definitely think that there is way too much of an emphasis put towards the cost of real estate and housing and focus on that than there is about the actual humanity of making sure that people actually have a roof over their head while at the same time still contributing back to our economy. So I think that there's a big issue there. And we have an issue with just how many unoccupied units that there are across the country, and you find it here in California as well. This is actually a good chart that I found on it. Let me go ahead and scroll down for you guys. This is how many empty properties there are per homeless person in the entire
Yep.
country. You can see here in California, it's 19-1, which is actually one of the better figures. But you go down to the South, I mean, well, there's not as many homeless people. It's 149-1, 333-1. Even in some of these orange states, 27-1, 80-1. And I think the number across the country, because obviously states like California and New York have lower numbers, but they have higher populations, drive that number down a little bit. I think it's still 29 homes for every homeless person in this country. And certainly there are places that are rentals and there are places that are unoccupied that people will, still go out and buy. But there's also this issue that I wanted to bring up, and this is an article from Redfin. Investors bought 26% of the country's most affordable homes in the fourth quarter, the highest share on record. Real estate investors bought 26.1% of low-priced U.S. homes that sold in the fourth quarter, highest share on record, up from 24% a year earlier. By comparison, investors purchased 13.6% of mid-priced homes that sold and 15.9% of high-priced homes that sold. So what you really are having, and this is the problem too, there's also corporations. I made a note of this. Corporate landlords own 446,000 homes nationwide. And I think what you're seeing is that a lot of these corporations or investors are buying up these properties and are buying up these homes to sell at a much higher rate, and make themselves a lot of money. And ultimately, it's become a multi-billion-dollar business, while at the same time
Right.
completely ignoring that there's a humanitarian issue going on the flip side of that, and very little is being done to actually curb that. So I think there's multiple things that can be done on this issue. I think the first thing that really needs to be looked at, and this would help people that obviously do have places to stay right now. It would also help people that are renting to maybe end up eventually being able to save the money to buy an actual home, is we need rent caps. We need rent caps all across the country. We need to completely cap rent increases. I know that there were some policies, I think, that were floated out there by Biden or maybe some governors to cap it by 10% over a year, or cap it by a certain amount of money increase per year. But the one thing for sure is that there needs to be cap on rent increases, because the amount of how much it costs to just rent a place now versus even 10 years ago is absolutely ridiculous. I want to say, I live here in Lincoln, and a lot of homes in the area that I'm located went for around 200K or a little bit less, even in the late 90s. And now you couldn't find a shack for 250K. So I mean, when you just look at the raising cost of living across the entire nation, especially in more populated states, while at the same time the cost of how much you're getting paid, your wages are very
Yep.
stagnant or barely gone up during that time as well. It doesn't equal out to inflation. There's a major issue there, and a lot of it comes down to corporations, and a lot of it comes down to just a lack of public policy.
Yep.
So I think that that's one thing that certainly can be done, but I think that people need to understand that affordable housing, well, it's something that might not help in the sense of your home price, because you're going to have more affordable housing near where you're at. It's at least going to put roofs over the head versus you having to maybe see the homeless person you don't want to see out on the street. A lot of people just want to pretend that this issue doesn't exist or don't want to see it, but it's still going to be out there. So in my
Yep.
opinion, the best way to solve it is at least temporarily giving somebody a roof over their head while help getting them back into the economy. I think public works programs would be a great thing for this. I think we should personally set up public housing, affordable housing for people in urban areas, and at the same time, force them to work public works programs that would help rebuild infrastructure or other things in this country. That way, they're giving back to our economy and actually helping out on a public scale.
Yeah. No, for sure. And you hit the nail on the head again with economic inequality is absolutely the root of this problem and how much it's grown. I mean, you can look at a graph over time, starting with the 80s through the 2020s, but really just over the last 5 to 10 years, it's skyrocketed. The ratio of CEO to worker pay is also exacerbated. I think it's like, oh, well over 400 to 1 now, which is, we're talking 5 times as high as it was just a few decades ago. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'll talk to like my parents, for example, who bought their home in Rockland about 10 to 12 years ago. That home has since doubled in its value. And I'm like, hey, like, are you making now your salary twice as much as you did 10 years? Like, no, no, they're not. So that ratio of cost of living to wages is just it's gotten out of hand. So that's why it's especially young people are going to really struggle to be able to put a down payment down on a home and make those mortgage payments because it's just not feasible in this economy unless you're starting off making somewhere in the top 5 to 10% of salaries. Like you're going to be stuck in this renting cycle forever. And like you said, that can help. That doing rent caps, doing rent control would be an amazing first step into to fixing this problem. I mean, because sudden rent increases by corporation landlords, property management companies do oftentimes lead to displacement, breaking leases and stuff. Finding someone else to take over the lease that can make the payment and displacing oftentimes single families, stuff like that, single family homes in suburbs and stuff like that. I think suburbs are also another issue. How heavily emphasized we are on each person having their own private property. This kind of hyper individualistic culture that we built um, has kind of changed how we do housing development in general. Like a lot of our zoning is made for single family homes, and we do lack a lot of zones that are permitted for higher density housing. So I think some zoning reforms where we do allow for more higher density housing would be great, especially in areas that are close to like public transit. So, like you said, they could do those public works programs without having to buy a car or anything like that, so they can give back to the economy and still be involved. Would be great, but at the end of the day, we have dozens of empty homes per homeless individual, and that's a that's a problem that no one really. I mean, there's people like you'll ask them like, "Hey, do you have a problem with giving homeless people houses?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." Like, I don't know why that's sort of the sentiment a lot of people have, but the idea of housing people without them, having to pay or whatever is just kind of breaks people's brains a little bit with the way American culture and individualism works. But yeah, obviously, rent control is a big thing we could do. Zoning reforms. I think also rent subsidies as well. Sort of like how we incentivize people to have kids. Example with like the tax credits. I think if we did rent tax credits or rent subsidies, maybe for vulnerable groups like seniors, disabled people, low income families, to help cover part of their rent in areas that are on the higher income, like high cost areas, like people living in dense urban areas that can't afford to leave but can't afford to stay really. So help subsidize their rent in those areas so they can at least find opportunity there. I think those are definitely some key things you could look at into helping address this problem. Uh, but that's not even getting at the roots, which is economic inequality and economic policy in the United States.
Yeah, 100%. And I think another issue too, in regards to homelessness, certainly is drug addiction too. There's certainly definitely an issue there with with drug addiction. I think a lot of that you can chalk up to just not having proper substance use programs or just support out there for people in a lot of different areas. Now, I do want to preface what I'm going to say too by saying at the same time I understand that San Francisco tried this and it wasn't as successful. I'm not sure if it was because of a lack of resources when they did try to have safe use sites or centers that were set up. But I know that they did not have as good of a level of success. But also, I know there have been areas around the country and in other countries, such as Canada, that have had higher levels of success for treating substance disorders. Especially for the homeless population. So I think that making sure there's enough resources out there for people to be able to actually get treated in that sense. It's also important to note too that there's always going to be people in any society that are just going to either try to abuse the system, or B, that are simply just going to not care and still will want to abuse their body. There are some people that are just TFG, but I think that the overwhelming amount of people would feel encouraged by having society at least give them some support, while at the same time them paying it back. So I definitely think that that's something that can be looked at for the future. Unfortunately, I think right now with a lot of the rhetoric and the policies that we have seen in red and blue states, that you're going to see probably a continuation of just enforcement on this, which ultimately, though, this string's going to have to break at some point. They're going to have to find either
Right.
end of it. They're going to have to come up with the answer. And pushing them to the sea, killing them, not caring for them is not a good solution in the eyes of the rest of the world, and not a good solution in the eyes of multiple states and the populations there. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see what happens for sure.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads, that gets us over to the last issue I wanted to talk about today. And that's that we have some more political news outside of just the issues. We have Kamala Harris choosing her vice presidential candidate for 2024. She has gone with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. I'll just come out and say before I get into all of this that after painfully watching the Democratic Party try to lose every single election possible over the last 8 years, it's incredible to me to see them actually do something competent for once and actually choose
It's
somebody that
amazing.
actually is for the people and will actually probably help the Democratic Party win this election cycle. Because I'll say this right now. Uh, a lot of people were saying that it was, Brandon, that it was Jover.
It
Well, I'm
was
gonna say it
Jover.
right now. I think now it is done old, bro. I think it is done. I think that Trump has about a
Yep.
2% chance after this because I think people are gonna
It's commencing.
yeah, when they start learning about Tim Walz, he is gonna be very likable for a lot of people in this country, way more than JD Vance and way more than Trump. I think you're gonna have a lot of people that like myself and others, feel that probably this should be the guy that was running for president all along.
Yep.
But nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and get into some of this here. So we'll go ahead and bring up this CNBC article, and then I'll talk a little bit about his record. Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, owns no stocks, bonds, or real estate, disclosure shows. I also like to preface this by saying that he also has taken very little limited amount of corporate PAC money. I think there is a little bit of corporate PAC money I've seen, but in comparison to JD Vance and in comparison to a lot of other politicians out there, it is very, 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 very minute, which is really good to see. So Tim Walz, the Democratic running mate of Kamala Harris, owns no stocks, bonds, or real estate, according to his most recent financial disclosure. Financial disclosure you can find on CFB, on Minnesota Gov. Walz's salary as governor of Minnesota is $127,629. He was eligible for a raise last year to $149,550, but he chose not to accept it. How about that, too? Somebody that actually cares more about giving the money or helping people instead of helping himself. If he's elected vice president in November, he would make an annual salary of $284,600. My God, I would kill for that money.
Right.
In 2019, after Walz was elected governor, he and his wife sold their Minnesota home and moved to the governor's mansion. They listed the four-bedroom house in Minnesota for $315,000 after buying it in 1997 for $145,000.
Wow.
Well, this relates back to our last issue. That home would probably go for $500,000 in a lot of markets out there and through a lot of different websites and realtors. So
Oh
cool to
yeah.
see that. Forbes estimates Vance's net worth based on publicly reported investments in cash to be somewhere between $3 million and $10 million. So again, this kind of just talks a little bit about that, but I wanted to get into his record here, which there's a good Twitter thread through More Perfect Union that talks about some of the things that he has done. Tim Walz, let's see here, signed a law guaranteeing free breakfast and lunch for all Minnesota students, and you could see the reaction of all these kids too. And I think he ends up hugging a couple of these kids as well. He enacted paid family and medical leave, giving workers up to 20 weeks off. And when he's asked about these things too, this is the thing too, not only does he actually have good policy solutions on some issues, he also has gone out there in like media and he's been asked, do you think that your left-wing record will help you or hurt you? He's like, man, I must be such a monster. I'm actually helping feed kids and giving them, making their stomachs full while they're actually out there learning and, going to contribute back. Like, it's just like the way he responds to stuff too is like,
Yep.
there's just no chance at all. They have nothing to attack him on. Some other things here. Walz also approved the nation's broadest right to repair law, allowing independent shops and owners of phones, laptops, and other electronic devices to more easily repair products without relying on corporations like Apple and Google. Signed into law a financial aid program giving free college tuition to students whose families made less than $80,000 a year. That would impact a majority of the families in Minnesota. Ban non-compete agreements and captive audience meetings, significantly expanding leverage for workers in meatpacking plants, warehouses, schools, and more. Also led to a lot more people unionizing through that as well. The law also helped create the nation's first standards board for nursing home workers, and that board voted to set a minimum wage of more than $23 an hour starting in 2027. Had a bill banning junk fees, legalized recreational marijuana in Minnesota, and expunged the records of people convicted for misdemeanor possession. You can see right here, this effort has been ongoing in Minnesota for at least a quarter century, going back to Jesse Ventura, another favorite of mine, and he actually helped get, I believe, medicinal marijuana passed while he was governor. So there's way more to it here. You can pull this up if you want to, but this just gives you an idea of some of his record. Genuinely, like, I can't believe I'm saying this because I was a person that Was very much happy when Bernie Sanders ran in 2016. It was going to be my first time voting. And after seeing what the Democratic Party did to him then and in 2020, it really completely turned me off from them. And I've been independent my entire time. And I voted third party, or I've wrote in candidates during the first two times I've gotten to vote for president. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll say the fact that I'm considering even voting for one of the two parties is insane. It's absolutely crazy the fact that they actually went with a guy who actually might be better on the policies than even Bernie Sanders. So I want Jake, I want
Yeah.
to get your thoughts on this. First off, I know that there were other picks out there she could have gone with, such as Cooper, such as Andy Beshear from Kentucky, J.B. Pritzker from Illinois, Mark Kelly from Arizona, and then of course Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, which is really what it seemed like it came down to. Let me just
Yeah.
thought, what's your thought on the pick, and ultimately, like, if you had to speculate, why do you think that she ultimately went with Tim Walz over maybe a guy like Shapiro?
I mean, I'm still kind of shocked that because you saw those polls coming out, like, yeah, like Shapiro, it's like 70-80% chance it's going to be him. She was going to announce it in Philadelphia, who her running mate was. Like, it just seemed to all be lining up for him, and I was really disappointed. I've already been, like you were saying, kind of turned off from the Democratic Party uh throughout at least the last half of the Biden administration, for sure. I was not planning on voting for him purely based off of his incompetence with the foreign policy and Israel, and how the Democratic Party was not being honest about his cognitive abilities and refusing to prop up, put up a better candidate. It was ridiculous, but they finally. I mean, I'm surprised, but like Nancy Pelosi and Obama, like they stepped up. They stepped up and they started. They made some good choice, and I'm scared for what's like something bad's gonna be like has got to happen for like this seems too good to be true to have Walz on the ticket. Like I'm scared for what's coming, but let's just think positively for now. But I think his appeal to the Rust Belt had a lot to do with it. He's very popular in his own states, as well as that region, and I think it's almost is kind of like a counter pick to JD Vance, who also comes from a similar region, like basically the still the Rust Belt, but he is like despised there. Like his net approval rating, like JD Vance's net approval rating in Ohio is like with double digits lower national, and nationally it's still bad, but like his own people hate him, and I think this was like sort of like a layup for them to be like, let's pick the guy that JD Vance is pretending to be, essentially. And especially well, given his record, he has a very productive record. Like, they had the Minnesota Democratic Party, they've had a small majority and done a lot with it. The model that they've been governing with is what uh the National Democratic Party should be doing, because they got their majority, and they were just like, they started going crazy, like in a good way. Like, we're getting menstrual products in bathrooms, we're going to start feeding kids, we're banning junk fees, we're going to do free college. Like they started doing all these great, very popular policies, and I think um as more and more people look into him, maybe even undecided people, that could possibly sway them. So I think uh that they got smart, and instead of going with the safe, establishment choice, they said, what, let's kind of fire back with sort of an aggressive pick, and I think it's going to pay off very well. Especially like when giving the Republican response, like they're hysterical right now. It's like I watched the Trump press conference from Mar-a-Lago. That was it was amazing. It was insane. Like it was some of the craziest rambling. Like he was visibly stressed and looking rough. Like it's great stuff. Like they even I tuned into Fox just because I do, just to see what they're saying, and I heard Jesse Waters is like playing a compilation of clips of him like waving weird and being like he has a girly wave, like tampon Tim. Like they got nothing. They have absolutely nothing, and it's so good.
I just gotta
So
say, Jesse Waters, regardless of what you believe, look, I don't care how far left or right you are. I've had people on the show that believe in multiple things. I want to have people from both sides on each week, even though I
right.
might disagree or agree with them. Okay, Jesse Waters is the dumbest motherfucker on television. Okay,
He's so bad.
this guy literally went on. I want to say the Valuetainment podcast. I think that's what it was with Patrick Bet David, and literally tried to claim that minimum wage workers for fast food in California, now that they're making $20 an hour, that's $100,000 salary. The math ain't math in there. The math ain't math in there,
What,
Jesse.
200-hour work weeks? Is that what we're doing? Like,
It's just, and that just shows you just also like how privileged people like him are to be in the position that he's in too, like as
yeah,
well. But again, just going back to Walz, yeah, I think it's insane to me that not only does Nancy Pelosi help push Biden out of the race, but she's actually out here defending Walz's policies, which are like, I mean, they're again, I think centrist policies in regards to what American people actually want if you look at polls, but in
right.
regards to the country and how things are governed, left wing policies. And she's actually out there
Yes.
defending it. It's actually absolutely insane. I mean, if you look at just these last 6 weeks, it might be the craziest 6 weeks in an election cycle in a very, very long time. We have Biden choosing to do a debate when he doesn't have to in June and
Yep.
completely just getting demolished up there on stage to the point where half the country is calling for him to drop out. Then you have somebody trying to kill Trump. We're now like 9 election cycles past that now. And then,
Yep.
and you would think that an election cycle where, like, I even said it on this show. I said, Trump, the fact that he's, there's an assassination attempt. Oh, it's done. He's going to win. Like that
Yeah.
picture is going to be hung in the Louvre.
Exactly.
I was like, and the fact that now we're past that
I
to the
had
point
no
where
hope.
like Biden's dropped out. Kamala's there. The enthusiasm, the momentum is picked up. She picks Tim Walz. It's in crazy. Like literally all of the cards that the Trump's team is playing. Anybody who's a poker fan will know I'm saying he's playing 2-7 offsuit where Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are playing pocket aces. They are out
Yes.
there playing the best possible hand in the best possible way. And I think it's going to pay dividends when it comes to November. I think that there still are some things that could happen for sure. I mean, it's going to be interesting when it
Absolutely.
gets to the debates. Of course, we saw Kamala yesterday in Michigan and the way she responded to the counter protesters at her rally there. And
Yeah.
she's going to need some of those votes if she's probably going to win states like that. But at the end of the day, the Democratic Party has more momentum than they have had probably since 2008.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. Was looking at some polling done. It was the question was it was Democrats that were polled, registered Democrats in swing states, and they were asked like, are you voting for the candidates of your party or are you voting against um, Donald Trump? And for the first time since 2008, it was over 50% of the respondents said they were voting for their candidates, which is like 20-30% higher than 2020, 2016, even 2012. Like it is yeah, some insane momentum, that unprecedented, that we haven't seen definitely since Obama's first term. And I think, and I'm also surprised how fast. I did not think that they were going to be able to turn around the shit show that they had going on in the first part of the this election year. Like it only has been what, like not even a month since Biden dropped out. Like if that feels like ages ago. Like that's I haven't we've hardly heard any news about Biden over the last couple of weeks. Like they've shifted, and just over the last 2 weeks or so, she's shot up like with double digits in the polls. Like it's like if they can keep this momentum going, or at least prevent it from going down, like I just don't see a way um that they're gonna lose the Rust Belt, at least for sure, because that's where she's polling the best. There's a good chance she might lose some of the Sun Belt states, the ones that Biden flipped, like Arizona, Georgia. That polling's still a little rough, but she might appeal to Hispanic and Black voters down there. But as far with having Walz on the ticket and just how fast the polling is swinged, especially nationally and then in these Rust Belt states, I think she's going to get that safe 270 if the momentum continues. It was just the good choice after good choice. The media uh, is also they're doing a good job with sort of letting the Republicans destroy themselves. They're not really going on the offense anymore. They're just kind of like showing what they're saying and be like, yeah, like this is who they are. Like this is fucking weird. Like they're letting them sort of implode, and I think that makes them appeal also to the people that voted for Biden in 2020, like the independent voters. That I think they definitely had lost, but they're starting to get back the people that sort of voted based off of like, hey, we want to step away from this chaos. We just kind of want to, vote for the adults in the room, sort of thing. They also can appeal to that base even with a more progressive ticket, simply based off the fact that the Republican Party is imploding. So I think that it's kind of the perfect storm right now for them to win this election.
Yeah, and anybody who's watching can see on the screen. I pulled up some polling data, and you could see over the last couple of weeks, Trump was up in 3 of these polls, and then all of a sudden Harris just shot up +4, +4, +4, +3. Won a couple. He won a couple recently, but I personally, Rasmussen is the one polling side I do not trust. So CNBC, okay, he's up 2, but like, Kamala's up in all of these other polls, and then you go to some of these swing states. Georgia, she's up in a poll for the first time, and that was after Trump was up 2 and up 1 for a while. North Carolina is
Oh
still
yeah,
relatively similar, but even North Carolina is in the conversation now, which is crazy. You've got Wisconsin, where Trump was up 1, or it was a virtual tie a couple weeks ago, and now she's up 2 or up a point. So she's already made big strides.
for the
Again,
Biden campaign
yeah,
completely.
yeah, and again, this is before we even know how the impact of Tim Walz is going to be, or how that's going to play. So it's going to be very interesting for sure, and I'm very, very intrigued by what continues with this election cycle. And again, I'll do my prediction here in a couple of weeks for it, but it's looking very positive right now for the Harris campaign, which is something I would not have said even a couple of weeks ago. So crazy things going on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You did cut out for me a little bit on the last like 5, 10 seconds
Yeah, I
there, but I
just
think
noticed my internet
I
went
got the gist.
unstable. So for anybody who just got back in, pretty much I was just pulling up some polling data. There's already some swing states where she's plus on Trump now, when she was down even a couple weeks ago. So it's just crazy to see. Anybody who wants to
Absolutely.
see polling, you can either go to 538, or you can go to Real Clear Politics polls, Real Clear Polling. There's some good data out there for really any election, even governor races as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, hey, that's pretty much going to do it for the show. Jake, thank you so much for coming on, man. That was great conversation, and glad to talk through some of those issues with you. And yeah, man, I'll definitely have to have you back sometime again, because this was really good.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. Yeah, it was nice to get back to talking about this stuff. It's been summer break for me off of classes for a while, so it's nice to kind of sharpen the political part of my brain back up heading into the fall semester and all that. So thanks for having me on, man.
Of course. All right. And everybody for tuning in, thank you as always for your support. Greatly appreciated. Again, more episodes will be coming out here, and I will have that prediction within the next couple of weeks. Still working on a couple other things with this channel as well. But that is going to do it for this week. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Liberation Hour. Until next time, take care. Peace out.